Shadows pulsed like breath across the wreckage of the skyport, flickering between broken beams of light and drifting debris that hung in the air as if afraid to fall. There was a voice, not human, but beautiful, quivering like it remembered how to weep. The walls of Sector 1-2C were scorched with plasma, the blast marks still steaming with the heat of a battle no one had time to understand. Amid the carnage lay twisted metal, synthetic flesh, and the hum of failing power systems. But deeper inside the ruined dock, a quiet corner spared by luck or fate, a lone alien woman crouched between the shattered bulkheads, glowing faintly, with bioluminescent patterns that blinked like Morse code in distress. Her skin shimmered with a soft silver hue, cracked and bleeding white, her four-fingered hands trembling as she pressed them to a wound just under her ribs. She whispered into the dark, a sound not meant for human ears, yet still aching with something ancient, pleading, mourning, remembering. Then came the echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate, human. Sergeant Micah Rowe stepped over bodies and scrap alike, rifle lowered but eyes scanning with the cautious grief of a man who had seen too much war to ever believe it was truly over. His breath fogged slightly inside the shattered atmosphere. Shell, helmet cracked but seal intact. The mission log said all civilians and aliens had evacuated this quadrant. The log lied. What he found instead was this strange being half-curled in agony, her body unreadable but undeniably alive. She looked up as he stepped closer, and her gaze pierced through the smoke like a flare shot into the stars. Her lips moved again, but her voice faltered as if crushed beneath the weight of a name she no longer dared to speak. Micah paused. Not out of fear, but out of recognition, and he didn't know why. He had never seen her before, and yet that voice had whispered to him once, in a dream or maybe in the brief silence between battle cries. It called something in him he hadn't known. He carried something tender, long buried under orders and armor and grief. He didn't know her name, couldn't even guess the syllables. But the way she spoke, even broken and low, was like a song he once heard when his mother cradled him beneath a thunderstorm. Somehow, impossibly, her voice mattered. And in a place built for destruction, in a station meant to fuel ships of war, that mattered more than anything else. The alarms had stopped. The silence wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Micah took one step closer, then another. He didn't raise his gun, didn't speak. He just looked at her the way one does when seeing a ghost that hurts to remember. And she blinked at him, her glowing skin dimming, and whispered something again. A name, maybe? Or a question he didn't understand. But still, he answered softly. I'm here. It was enough for now. Micah knelt slowly, the servos in his battered exosuit whining as if protesting his choice to lower himself into a place of vulnerability. He was trained to move forward, not down. Trained to secure, dominate, extract. But the moment his eyes met hers, that shimmering creature half folded on the floor, something inside him, something older than his training, whispered a truth deeper than any directive. This wasn't a combatant. She was injured, yes, but the wound wasn't just physical. She was breaking in front of him, and not in the way enemies die. This was someone unraveling quietly, like a soldier who had waited too long for rescue. Micah could see it in the way. She clutched her side, not to protect herself, but as though trying to hold in her spirit before it leaked out with the blood and light. Her eyes, large, glossy, impossible shades of violet, didn't accuse him. They searched him, desperate for something she didn't dare hope for. He reached for the medkit strapped to his thigh. The movement startled her. Her bioluminescence pulsed into a violent, strobe-like blue, and her long limbs tensed, ready to flee or fight despite her pain. Micah froze mid-motion, open palm raised in the ancient universal gesture. I mean no harm. It's all right, he said gently, voice quiet as the hush between aftershocks. It's just medicine, for you. He showed her the injector, turned it slowly in his fingers. The blue flicker of her skin softened, though her breath stayed sharp and quick like she expected every kindness to be a trap. Still, when he inched closer and knelt beside her, she didn't strike or run. She watched. She chose to trust. The needle hissed against her side and her entire frame went taut, but she did not scream. Her hand, warm and light despite the alienness of it, pressed weakly against his chest plate. He felt it through the armor. Not pressure presence. Then, without warning, she began to speak again. The same phrase, soft, lilting, thick with emotion. Micah listened, tried to map the words in his head. Tried to remember if this species, whatever she was, had any known language similarities. Nothing. And yet, the way she said it, it felt like something familiar, not the words. The cadence. The sorrow. I don't know your name, he murmured, glancing down at her hand still resting on him. I don't even know what species you are. He paused, the moment swelling with a strange vulnerability. But I remember your voice from somewhere, maybe a dream, maybe a battle. I don't know, it doesn't make sense. He chuckled, bitterly at himself, the sound lost in the vast hollow of the ruined station. I've been fighting for so long, I forgot how to make sense of anything. She leaned forward, barely, just enough to let her forehead touch the base of his helmet. It was a small contact, but to Micah, it felt like a cathedral bell had rung inside his chest. Something old and aching and human opened within him, a chamber he thought the war had locked shut forever. He let her stay there, didn't move, didn't speak again. The moment didn't need translation. It was the first peace either of them had known in weeks or maybe years. Behind them, the shadows shifted. Somewhere deeper in the station, a damaged generator sputtered back to life with a cough of sparks. Danger was still near. Rescue was not. Rescue was not. But Micah didn't rise. He stayed with her, even as the sirens threatened to wail again, even as his HUD flashed with warnings he ignored. He couldn't explain it. She didn't need him to. There was a connection forming here, not of words, but of recognition. Of soul. And Micah, hardened soldier of Earth's outer defense corps, found himself feeling something he hadn't allowed in years. Hope. The hours bled together like bruises under skin, slow and deep, inside that half-lit tomb of a station where time had no shape anymore. Micah remained beside her, his exosuit now in low-power mode, the armor plates stained with dried blood his. And others. The alien woman, he still had no name for her, had stabilized somewhat. The wound on her side was closed, though her breath still fluttered like bird wings caught in wind. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her voice slipped between melody and meaning, as though her language was more emotion than grammar. Still, he began to hear things in it, not just sounds, but intentions. The difference between sorrow and guilt, between longing and fear. Her voice was a violin strung across galaxies, and somehow, the notes made sense, even if the lyrics DID in single quotes T. Micah learned her body language. The subtle change in the glow of her skin, the way her gaze would dart. When she was anxious or dim, when she was ashamed. Once, while checking a ceiling panel for a possible escape route, he turned and saw her huddled in on herself, shaking not from pain, but from memory. She was remembering something awful, and though no words passed between them, he dropped to her side and placed his gloved hand gently against her back. She flinched but didn't pull away. He didn't ask. Some pain doesn't want to be spoken. Some grief just wants to be seen. In return, she tried to understand him too. Her hand would sometimes reach for the ragged, fading nameplate on his chest, row, and trace it with a kind of reverence, as if tasting the shape of humanity through scratched metal. She mimicked his words sometimes, trying them with her soft, lilting accent. M-R-O. Then a pause, as if testing something deeper. Micah. That was the first time she'd said his name. He forgot the rest of the world for a moment. He forgot his aching legs and sleepless brain, and how long it had been since he'd heard another human voice not shouting orders or dying in return. He tried to name her. He pointed to her chest gently and asked, "You?" She responded with a phrase, soft and hard to reproduce, like a breeze whispering through crystal. He tried to say it back, failed, tried again. She smiled, God, she smiled, and the faint golden glow returned to her skin, a hue he had come to associate with calm. But when he asked again, days later, she said something different, and something else. Like her name was a moving target, maybe it was. Or maybe, as he was beginning to suspect, it wasn't her name she wanted him to remember, it was her. Her essence. Her voice at night, or what passed for night beneath the fractured hull and flickering systems, they'd sit in silence. And in that silence, she would sing, quietly, without words. Her voice drifted like mist between the metal bones of the station, and it wrapped around Micah's heart with strange warmth. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he imagined a world where the war hadn't happened. A world where he could follow that voice to a home with no guns, no orders, no blood-soaked gravity. He didn't love her, he didn't know her, but he felt her. That mattered more. One evening, she touched his hand, not just briefly, not out of need, but gently, choosing him in that moment. She pointed to a burnt emblem on the wall, a twisted flag of some fallen alliance, and said something long and soft. He shook his head, not understanding. She paused, then pointed to herself. Then to him. Then mine two hands coming together. Together, he whispered. She smiled again. Somewhere beyond the station, the war still raged. But in this wreckage, a soldier and a stranger had built something quiet, fragile, and real, not out of understanding, but out of shared loneliness. and the echo of a voice that refused to be forgotten. Asterisk, the station stirred with new noises, mechanical grounds that sounded too rhythmic to be accidents, too deliberate to be ignored. Micah tensed the moment he heard them metal boots clanging in sequence, and a soft pulse in the distance like a scanner sweeping the dark. It had been quiet for days, the kind of silence that bred fragile peace. Now, that peace cracked like thin ice. He stood, rifle in hand, every movement quiet, calculated, but his mind raced like floodwater. They weren't alone anymore. She heard it too. Her skin dimmed to a warning blue, and her gaze found his with something close to fear, but deeper. More complex, laced with guilt. She said something in her language, a phrase she hadn't used before. Her fingers drew a shape in the air, like a spiral closing in on itself. Her voice, once soft and fluid, sharpened with urgency. Micah recognized it now. She wasn't just warning him. She was telling him a story, piece by piece, with gestures, sounds, and fragments of English she had picked up from him. She painted a picture. She wasn't a civilian. She hadn't just crashed here or fled an attack. She was something else, a weapon, once. A carrier of information, maybe even a scout. Her kind had been bred, not born for resonance, for communication between minds. Her voice wasn't just sound. It was memory, imprint, encryption. She wasn't only singing to soothe herself. She was transmitting, and someone had found her. Signal.Micah single quotes, as heart sank as the pieces fell into place like ash settling after an explosion. The broken station, the silence, the failure of emergency systems, this wasn't an accident. She had been hiding here, not stranded, and now someone was coming. Not to rescue, to retrieve. Who? He asked, breath shallow. Who's coming? For you? She tried to explain, her hands drawing shapes that bent and crossed and spiraled. They made me, she finally said. It was the clearest English she'd spoken, and it hit him like a blow. I ran. Her eyes glistened with the weight of that sentence. They want me back. Micah stared at her, searching her face for deception, for some twist of manipulation. But there was only sorrow, their regret so real it ached. He thought about her songs, the way they carried something deeper than melody. He thought about the moments when she touched his chest plate, when she said his name, not commands. Not manipulation, emotion, real, human, even if she wasn't. She had been made by something for something. A tool in a galactic war humanity. Barely understood, but she ran. She fled whatever used her, whatever built her to be less than whole. And now those creators or owners were close. He stood, watching her. Why me? He asked quietly. Why my voice? Why this connection? She looked at him, a kind of sadness blooming on her face like frost across glass. She reached up, touched his face, and whispered, You remember. She meant more than memory. She meant something deeper: recognition, empathy, the human gift that no algorithm, no empire, no weaponized species could replicate. He didn't just hear her voice. He felt it, listened to it like it mattered. That had been enough to break her free, to make her run, to make her something more than she was built to be. And now that same gift would cost them both thought in the distance. The sound of boots echoed louder. A voice, garbled through static and war-tech modulation, called out in an alien tongue that chilled. The air, she flinched. Micah raised his rifle. Whatever was coming, it didn't come in peace. They came in with the precision of a scalpel and the weight of a guillotine's sleek figures wrapped in obsidian armor, faceless and silent, save for the pulsing glow of their ocular implants. 6 of them, moving like a single organism, not soldiers, but something colder. Micah watched them descend the corridor through a crack in the wall, his breath shallow, fingers tense around his rifle. The alien woman, his companion, his strange connection to something bigger than himself, crouched behind him, trembling. Not with fear, but with dread she had carried for far too long. These were her makers, her jailers, her undoing. A voice cut through the station's low hum, projected from the lead figure with perfect, cruel clarity. The language wasn't English, but it didn't need to be. Tone carried the message well enough. Authority, retrieval, termination if necessary. And then, in a moment of bone-deep horror, the lead one turned its gaze toward Micah and spoke 3 words in near-perfect Earth standard. Return the echo. Micah didn't move. His body, trained by years of war and survival, begged him to calculate how many shots, how many seconds, how many breaths before he was dead or worse. But something louder screamed in him, the part that had sat in silence with her, the part that remembered what it felt like to matter to another, being simply for existing, the part that had listened to her voice and found hope again. She wasn't echo. She was not a tool. She was not theirs. Behind him, she rose to her feet slowly, skin pulsing with a conflicted rhythm, part gold, part blue, like her body couldn't decide whether to fight or surrender. Her voice floated forward, fragile, resigned. She said something in her native tongue that made the lead figure pause. It sounded like surrender. Micah turned sharply toward her. "No," he whispered, stepping between her and them. "Don't." But she only looked at him with that mournful calm, the kind of peace one wears when accepting the fall. And that's when he made his choice. He stepped forward. "I won't give her to you," he said, loud and slow, letting his voice echo down the corridor like thunder in a vacuum. The words were simple, defiant, and undeniable. The lead figure raised a weapon, energy crackling at its tip. The air trembled. The other 5 spread out in formation, like a net about to be cast. "Human," it replied. "She does not belong to you." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Micah barked, the fire in his chest overtaking fear. "She's more than what you made. She chose to be here. That means she's free." The word rang strange in that dead space. Freed up behind him, the alien woman whispered his name, not with desperation, but with wonder, as if she hadn't expected anyone to say what he just had. Her voice trembled with new warmth, and Micah knew, whatever happened next, he had already saved her in a way that no armor or weapon ever could. But now came the price. The lead figure took a step forward, gun raised, unblinking. Micah didn't move. His weapon was still slung at his shoulder, forgotten. He wasn't here to win a firefight. He was here to stand between a free soul and the cage reaching for her. "I said no," he repeated, softer now, but unwavering. "They didn't fire." "Not yet, but they didn't retreat either." The moment stretched like drawn wire, vibrating with tension, one breath away from snapping. He knew the cost. Knew what would happen if they opened fire. He didn't care. Some things were worth standing for, even dying for. Because for the first time in too long, he wasn't just surviving. He was choosing, asterisk, the silence before the attack was not empty. It was a howl trapped in a vacuum, a scream held between 2 heartbeats, the moment when past and future locked eyes. Micah stood firm, his boots welded to purpose, his heart louder than the warning pings in his HUD. The 6 armored figures inched forward, weapons raised with the mechanical precision of those who no longer feared death, who perhaps no longer remembered it. The lead one stepped closer, close enough that Micah could see the dull reflection of himself in its curved mask, small, battered, human, insignificant, but still standing. The alien woman, his companion. The voice he could never forget touched his arm, trying to pull him back. Her voice broke as she whispered something that felt like a plea, maybe for his safety, maybe for peace. But Micah couldn't listen, not because he didn't care, because he did too much. And caring meant choosing, even when it hurt, even when it killed. "Dip behind me," he said, softly, without looking at her. She hesitated, then obeyed. Trust, he thought. She trusted him. That had to mean something. That had to be enough. The lead figure took another step, and then its voice came again, this time deeper, colder. "Stand down, human. Your resistance serves no logic." Micah's laugh cracked like dry ice. "Yeah," he said. "Well, logic never won a war. Heart did. And then he moved. He didn't fire. He didn't charge. He simply stepped forward, slow and sure, placing himself fully between the alien woman and the soldiers who wanted to drag her back into chains. He dropped his rifle, let it clatter to the floor, raised both hands not in surrender but in defiance. He was unarmed, unarmored in the ways that mattered. And yet he had never felt stronger. "If you want her," he said, "you go through me." The lead figure's weapon hummed with energy. One of the others raised a scanning module, projecting a threat assessment. Human, low risk, outgunned, outnumbered. Logic demanded. Swift termination, but something else happened. She sang, behind him. The alien woman began to sing, not in panic, not in fear, but in strength. The song vibrated through the metal of the station, harmonics blooming into the walls, into the floor, into Micah's very blood. It was not a cry for help. It was a declaration. A signal that reached past weapon systems and into something ancient. The enemy paused. For 1 second, just one, their formation broke. The lead figure faltered, its head twitching slightly as the song touched something buried deep. Not memory, not emotion, but the echo of a design they could not overwrite. The sound of choice, of identity awakening. Micah saw it, he felt it. And in that moment, he did something reckless, something only a human would even think of doing. He charged, not at the enemy. At the wall behind them, a control panel, damaged but still glowing faintly, blinked with a faint emergency override. The station's gravity systems. He reached it, slammed his fist into the console, and shouted into the mic, "Seal this section. Lockdown protocol, manual code M, row, execute." The floor dropped, the soldiers tumbled, weightless for a split second, before emergency shutters slammed down across the corridor, cutting them off. Micah and the alien woman fell together, hard, and to the opposite bulkhead as the station locked into red alert. He gasped for breath, pain blooming across his ribs, but they were safe. For now, she crawled to him, her hands glowing gold again, frantic and gentle all at once. He looked at her and smiled through bloody teeth. "Guess we bought a few minutes." She held his face, her forehead resting against his. Her song, now softer, pulsed in waves that eased the pain like rain cooling fire. "You're free," he whispered, barely audible. "You don't ever have to go back." And though her voice was untranslatable, he knew what she said next. "Neither do you." The station was dying slowly now. The lockdown had triggered a chain of failsafes, and the aging reactor, cracked and exhausted from years of overuse, began to murmur its final warnings. The emergency lights flickered like the last pulse of a fading heart, and the metal walls groaned as though the station itself was trying to say goodbye. Micah sat with his back against a fallen beam, ribs aching with every breath, suit cracked, helmet discarded. The air was thin, tinged with ozone, and the scent of melting circuits. Still, he smiled. She knelt beside him, arms wrapped around her middle, as if holding something precious within herself. Her skin glowed faintly, not with fear or panic, but with something warmer like embers in a hearth refusing to go out. She looked down at him with wide, glistening eyes, her expression unreadable but heavy with emotion. Her voice, when it came, was no longer just sound, it was music woven with memory, layered with sorrow and wonder, filled with the echo of everything. They had survived. Micah didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. He heard apology, gratitude, love not romantic, not even specific. Just the raw, soul-deep acknowledgement that someone else had changed you. That in a universe ruled by war and indifference, someone chose you, chose to see you, chose to stand beside you. That was love in its rarest form. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Her fingers were strange long, soft, pulsing gently with light, but they curled around his like they belonged there. He looked up at the fractured ceiling, where stars winked through cracks in the hall. "I wish I knew your name," he murmured, voice hoarse. "I wish I could carry it with me." She leaned close, pressed her forehead to his one last time, and whispered something. A name, maybe, or goodbye, or both. Then she rose, stepped away from him, and sang. The song swelled through the corridor, filled every shadow and corner, reached into broken systems and dead machinery like sunlight through ash. It wasn't a song for him anymore, it was a beacon. Her final broadcast, but it wasn't calling for rescue. It was calling for change. A farewell to who she had been. A declaration that she would not return to the ones who made her, would not be a weapon, a tool, a ghost. She was choosing her own story now. A soft light bloomed around her, and Micah saw something awaken in the air, a shimmer like a portal, a rift barely held open by the power of her voice. Her escape, her salvation. She turned to him once more, eyes wide with sorrow, and smiled. The first and last time he would see that expression again, he nodded. "Go," and she did. She stepped into the light, and in a breath, she was gone. The silence returned. Micah exhaled, slow and cracked. He leaned back against the wall and let the stillness settle around him. Alarms flickered in his HUD. The station wouldn't hold much longer. He could call for evac, maybe, but in truth, he wasn't sure he wanted to, not right away. Not yet, because something in him had changed. A part of him had been broken open and filled with something he didn't know humans could. Still carry not just survival, not just stubbornness, but empathy deeper than instinct. The ability to look at something foreign, something terrifying, and say, "I see you, I hear you. I will not let you fall." He didn't remember her name. He couldn't have pronounced it anyway. But he would never forget her voice, and in that voice, humanity had found its greatest weapon, not its strength, but its heart.